Now, please welcome back Anjali, joined by Brad, CEO of Cobot, for our fireside chat on Beyond Humanoid Hype, where physical AI is actually working today. Brad is a Core 6 MIT-trained engineer who deployed 500,000 plus robots at Amazon before founding Cobot and launching Proxy. So everyone, please give them a round of applause.
This is awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the Mimo conference for hosting this fireside chat. I think Dr. Bhagra and I have been crossed paths a number of times at Mayo in the last 3 years. We've been working together. So let me introduce a little bit kind of Cobot and Proxy, but then I think we want to get into what it takes to bring change into these environments. So as mentioned, we started Cobot 4 years ago with the vision to bring robots, intelligent robots, into every sector. And yeah, my background, I led robotics for Amazon. I went to Scale AI after Amazon, led their CTO for their data collection efforts, and then decided to get back into robotics. So this is Proxy. Let me show you. You'll see some hospital hallways. These are actually Mayo Clinic's hospital hallways where we have over a dozen robots operating today.
I'm seeing 51 NC on the cart. Got it. Looking up cart destination.
You spoke earlier, I got to see your talk earlier about Mayo's automation journey, kind of elevating human care and leading that automation work. What led you to bring physical AI and robotics into scope for that? There's so much to be done in large language models and research AI, but what led you to bring physical AI into that?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. First of all, really excited about the partnership as well. I recall back in 2023 when we started talking about how we could work together, which was right around the time we were building a strategy for intelligent automation. I think there were two things abundantly clear to us. There was no lack of knowledge at Mayo Clinic, but our big bottleneck and constraint was capacity. And when we talk of capacity, we knew that automation is great where we have appropriate process mining and repetitive tasks. And those repetitive tasks fall into two broad categories. One is cognitive repetitive tasks, but then the other one, candidly, is physical repetitive tasks. So from the get-go, it was very clear to me and the team that we needed to have a broad vision for this so that we could really create the impact that would significantly impact our patients, as I spoke earlier, as well as our staff. So from the get-go, we were very inclusive, pan-inclusive of the tech stack that we were looking at in terms of capability. Hence, really that broad range of starting from robotic process automation all the way to physical AI, not just mechanical robots, but truly AI-powered robots into our practice. And clearly what we've learned in the last 3 years, it's a testament to a strategy that has demonstrated gains to our staff as well as our patients. The other thing I would add quickly while we are talking about this, as I skipped that in my earlier talk, was, when we think of physical AI, and I loved how Sri from AWS, I don't know if you two had worked together when you were back there, kind of described the potential of physical AI. And we broadly think about it in three categories. One is clinical robotics. So things that will directly impact outcomes in the OR, in the procedural environment, where the robot is essentially a collaborative bot to our surgeon. So that's one big category. And for anybody in the room who's had a surgery or was needing a complex surgery, or your family member needing a complex surgery, there are questions in your mind. Is my surgeon using the latest and the greatest technology and capability to take care of our loved one? So I would say that from the get-go is a very strong area. But then the other two categories are not unique to healthcare. And I think this is where there are a lot of learnings we had as we were talking to you and the team from manufacturing and warehousing. So the other two categories are logistics, which healthcare, like any other industry, has a ton of, where, of course, we've seen gains. And then really our environmental services. Across the world, any restaurant you go to, you definitely see robots with dishes now. So these aren't minor things. They look like, it's a simple thing add on, but it really brings meaningful impact.
No, that's awesome. Mayo's impressive because you take a 30-year, 100-year view. You're obviously building a large new hospital, the bolt forward unbound. How do you envision the kind of transformation of care that might be possible, and how you might elevate the staff you have?
Yeah. So I feel the biggest bottleneck or dependency right now for real R in the ROI is creativity of leaders and teams around the possibility. So that is something we and I don't want to think about alone, which is why I love working with partners and learning regarding capability. Because candidly, I went to med school, but then to business school and MIT to really understand, to be a good physician. And medicine is a team sport. Nobody leverages impact all on our own. And if you don't have the right minds thinking about the right questions that need to be asked, or having the right aspirational goals, I think we fall short of our impact. So I would say for us, it's really stretching and having a panoramic view, broadening our aperture on the art of the possible, not doing it alone, learning from partners, and constantly challenging our own mindset, not settling for what's here and now. With that, actually, I want to ask you, because the conversations that we started having back in 2023, which were candidly more intellectual and academic around capability, and then we started deploying. And of course, there were a lot of kinks in the way. Like, how do you treat proxy to make that turn in the hallway? By the way, my clinical practice area is right adjacent to proxy's path of delivery of some surgical instrument. So I feel very friendly to our proxy robots now. But how did you envision, the complexity of a healthcare environment, of a hospital? How did you envision the AI component in the self-learning, and how a proxy would deliver the real impact in a very complex environment like ours?
Yeah, I think so at Amazon, we were able to exploit a lot of structure, and the fact that Amazon was building, new 1 million square foot logistics facilities. But one of the things we had analyzed at Amazon was where we might potentially use humanoid robots. We had seen some progress in humanoid space, 2017, 2018. And so we studied it. And we found over 40 process paths at Amazon where we would use humanoids. And what they all were what I would call secondary material, in a manufacturing world, we'd call it water spider work, right? But, the replenishment, restocking, exception handling, all of these additional cases, but they were all collaborative in and amongst humans. But we did that was a technology forward question. If we had humanoids, where would we use them? We then looked at those process paths and said, if we wanted to solve these process paths, what kind of robot would we want? And in no case was it, for us at Amazon, a humanoid. Because it turned out in no case at Amazon were 2 legs valuable. In fact, having a low center of mass and stable mobility, and Amazon was designed around carts. And it just happened to be in 2019, actually, when I was leading robotics at Amazon, my dad was being treated at Mayo Clinic, and he said, this place needs robots. And I gave him all the reasons it wouldn't work. Because ramps and carpets and elevators and tight hallways and busy patients and mobility challenged patients and all these things but it did occur to me, and he just said, I bet you could solve all that. He was a wildlife biologist. So not a MIT trained engineer, and I was looking at it from an engineering lens saying, I don't know how to do this. But it did occur to me at the time that capability we've been talking about at Amazon, if it existed, could handle the logistics and material flows. And really, it did cause me to pivot to thinking about like hospital if you think about manufacturing as materials flowing to the manufacturing line, right? In a hospital, you think about materials flowing to the OR, to the procedure areas, to the patient's room. There are a lot of materials flowing, right? And it occurred to me then that if we had such a capability, that hospitals might be. When we started Cobot and started to design proxy, I had in the back of my mind that use case, but wasn't planning to try to bring it to hospitals anytime soon because the hospital is such a challenging engineering environment. But it turns out Mayo Clinic actually called us just after we started the company and said, hey, we're embarking on this transformation. We'd love to learn more, your experience at Amazon, others. How could we? And so that's where we started these very intellectual conversations. Frankly, we didn't have a product yet. But it's been amazing. We have proxy now running through the main hallway, dealing with every one of those issues that I told my dad would make it impossible, and solving them, and with kind of collaborative mobility. And it's really amazing because, what I see when I go is the staff's excited. The staff knows where proxy's going next. Like they'll come and tell me like proxy's going to this other place next, and to see, and what we learned in doing it is that sure, the general services staff is supposed to take these procedures, but they don't always get to it, and then the nurses are responsible for taking a cart. And if you're trained as a nurse and you're trying to provide care, taking a cart down to a sterilization area is a necessary part of the job. And as operators, hospital administrators and our operators, right? They're trying to get the job done. So you've got to take the cart. Someone has to take it. But if we can make that robots, not nurses, that I don't know, that's what gets my team really excited.
Yeah. If I could add to that, we talk about this all the time. I don't think it's unique to healthcare. Really enabling humans to work at the top of their license. The reality is, in an environment like healthcare, anybody will do anything within regulatory and certification guidelines to save a life, right? Like if that might mean taking equipment and walking it to the OR or whatnot, but is that the best use of humans in that instance? And I think, adding robots to our care teams as an extension of the care team was essentially to do that, to reduce the administrative or the physical burdens of care that come with a complex environment like healthcare. And it's interesting you mentioned that because I spoke with my gastroenterology colleagues and endoscopists, and just asking them, from their vantage point, do they see a benefit of something that's happening in the background instead of a human delivering their endoscopes? It's actually proxy. And I think that there is benefit of that consistency because there's programming. There'll be absolutely no delay in procedures, which can have a significant impact. I know we've been talking about throughput all day, but if you really think about how ORs work, how procedural rooms work in a healthcare environment, those are the back-end efficiencies that need to be created so that everything kind of runs smoothly. So I couldn't agree more with you regarding enabling humans to focus on patient-centered, more human-centered sort of care elements within healthcare specifically. And I think that's really rewarding. And then I know it's early days for humanoids, and we are certainly very aspirational in, and we don't want to be committed to only one kind of physical AI. But the goal here would be to stretch at the edges at all times and see where any kind of technology can help us take better care of our patients.
There's a story that comes to mind. So we first started deploying proxy, not in the main hospital, but in one of Mayo Clinic's offsite specimen processing labs. And we started bringing the robot and moving these carts. You saw some of that in the video. But there was a member of the team there who kind of kept looking over at the robots, looking over at us, and kind of with a quizzical look. We weren't quite sure if he was, excited about this idea or not excited about this idea. And a few days later, he came up to one of our staff members and said, so does this mean I don't move that cart anymore? And we said, yeah, the robots will take on that work now. And he said, that's amazing, because every time I got up and had to take that cart, I felt like I wasn't processing a patient's critical test that they needed to process, right? And this is what we found consistently at Amazon, in every place we've deployed robots. If great operators, number of great operators in the room, great operators motivate their team around the mission, right? The mission they're trying to do. If that's a transload facility, it's getting freight trucks loaded and out the door. If that's a specimen processing lab, it's getting people's, if that's a gastroenterology, it's procedures done. If your robots can help in getting the job done, then they're a welcome part of the operating workforce. If they get in the way, if they make it worse, they'll get rejected extremely, extremely quickly. And so we focused a lot on how do we make sure that we out the gate are helping make the operation better. But tell me, you work on this at the administrative level, right? There are multiple layers of IT security and physical plant and employee relations, public relations, patient. How do you think about change management at that kind of macro level?
Yeah, so it's first of all, it's very complex. There's multiple stakeholders, but what makes it, I would say, relatively easy is to always put that human in the center, because in our organization, it's very clear the needs of the patient come first. And so we just absolutely focus on that. So with any deployment, whether it's a physical AI, digital AI, a new procedure that would be added in the clinic, a new treatment that would be offered to our patient, a new clinic that would be set up, it could be any of the above. If there's a clear value proposition for our patients, then everybody aligns around it. So for us, we are fortunate that we have that buy-in. And again, I'm going back to those 4 things that are essential, right? You have an executive sponsorship, like a top-down total buy-in on we are going to do this. We are committed to do this because this will benefit our patients. But then we have to work through other pieces, who are the stakeholders that need to be at the table. Because certainly in this case, it's the risk and the compliance and the governance bodies and then our finance organization. But if we can create a value proposition that resonates across the board and points towards our patients and our staff, we can move things along. Now, it's easier said than done. There's lots of learning because value looks very differently depending on the vertical you talk to within the organization. but it's a learning process. The other piece I would say is really including the business owners in the decision making. So in our case, it would be the clinical leaders. In this case, it was the surgeons or the endoscopists for whom we had to build certain efficiency. So when they become the owners, and then we become the facilitators, I think it lands way better. And then clearly for us at Mayo Clinic, governance is all about enablement versus deceleration. And we try to use our existing sort of governance and guardrails versus imposing new ones. And of course, we work with our technology organization, our IT group for all the appropriate guardrails. So again, it's the guiding statement and just ensuring a good top-down business leader ownership and a bottoms-up engagement. And I think we could open it up for questions. I did not have time for questions earlier, so I'm also happy to take questions from my talk earlier.
There's not a lot of hospitals, I imagine, that have introduced robots and automation. One thing that happens in manufacturing environments when you put robots in is you have this sort of shifting of constraints or bottleneck migration that occurs. Did you learn something like that, and how did you respond to it, and where else could you imagine sort of physical AI being put in the environment?
Yeah, great question. So I do want to echo what you said, because when I was back in class here and I was picking Daniela Russ, Pulkit, and others' brains on, within MIT on how do you build a strategy within healthcare, the reality was there weren't enough organizations that we could learn with. I would say the bottlenecks within healthcare are similar. So, for example, the example that Brad shared within our DLMP, our labs environment, we get thousands of samples every single day. And sometimes those bottlenecks can be around movement of the samples and appropriate labeling tasks. And I think that's a great place for us to start thinking. It's adjacent to our clinical practice, and it's in the vicinity. That was one great area for us to jump right in and eliminate those bottlenecks that were really amenable to physical AI solutions. So that's one example. The other, I would say, our workforce is overstretched, like post-COVID. It has been incredibly challenging to find the right number of nurses deployed at the right areas. So one very, I would say, illustrative example here is we incorporated linen delivery with robots for our nurses, so they didn't have to walk the hallways and get stuff for the patients. And we were able to do way better with staffing ratios for our nurses with deployment of robotics as an extension of our nursing care team.
Yeah, the benefits you get in manufacturing, and we saw this obviously in Amazon and logistics as well, right? Is first you're taking a human process and moving it under digital control, and that does allow you to optimize and refine that process quite a bit. But it also kind of puts a metronomic capability in that if you know reliably that the carts are always going to show up on time, right? And you're not, waiting for another department and for a general services staff member to become available to move it, it lets the whole operation start to, the whole notion that you used to, set your watch by when the trains arrived because the trains ran so reliably. If you can get robots to do the same thing, they kind of add this heartbeat to the operation that can make the whole thing just run more reliably. And we see that time and time again in these human robot hybrid systems.
Yeah. I think one more example that I'll highlight is our ORs are incredibly busy during the day, but a lot of the prep work of sterilizing of all the instruments and SPD is a huge kind of manufacturing-like thing that works round the clock and candidly overnight when it's extremely challenging to recruit consistent human labor. And these are all very manual tasks. but tray preparations, instrument processing. So there's a lot of manufacturing-like activity happening in healthcare organization infrastructurally. His hand was up first, and then we'll come to you. Thanks.
I don't mind switching.
It's all right. Go.
Just really briefly, I've interfaced both with the medical. A lot of a medical professional's job is wondering, they must also have a lot of anxiety reasonable.
So we've been working together for 3 years, and really Mayo approached us to help educate, and we said, well, this would be interesting because we'd like to learn the hospital space, and so it's been really kind of a mutual education of what it takes to bring robots into the space. So yeah, I think education is a huge part of successful technology adoption. We do deploy a field team with the deployments, particularly very early deployments like Mayo Clinic, I think got our, I don't know, 6th or 7th robot. And so, but that's become a really, really trusted and valued partnership between our staffs. And I think, that's foundational to any success with any new technology.
Yeah, and I would add our tolerance for error is 0 in healthcare. Despite that, there are adverse outcomes. And so education, I couldn't agree more, is absolutely critical. There are no shortcuts and no negotiations around that. However, having said that, I would say in general, the literacy level with tech within healthcare workers is climbing by the hour in the minute. So I also want to say it's not, and I hope it's not an unreasonable demand because we cannot negotiate with safety quality. We are firm believers in safety first, quality always, something I heard earlier as well. So, but I would say we're also doing our own fair share of educating ourselves on the technology front. And we also hope to educate our partners regarding, what are the non-negotiables. And the one thing about healthcare is everybody is a consumer of healthcare. So I think there's appreciation from our partners as well, like why we tend to be so idiosyncratic around, the non-negotiables. Please.
Discussion. Could you comment on what are the opportunities and potentially the challenges of applying these technologies in the nursing functions within a hospital or in any of the nursing processes? Is that coming down the pipe? Are there any activities underway that you're aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it warrants a really long, sophisticated response. But I'll try to do justice within the time that we have. So any role within healthcare, we have to understand there's hours and years of training, licensure, accreditation, certification, and there are good reasons behind that. So anytime we bring any kind of assistive sort of team members, it's critical that the work be guided by our nurses. So there is complete buy-in, transparency, and good understanding of where is value add versus, we are robbing the nurses or our patients of an essential experience within healthcare. So with that said, so for example, at Mayo Clinic, our nurses, our nursing leaders, all of our business owners actually own the implementation pathway. There's a lot of co-discovery that we do with our partners before anything is implemented. It's sometimes to the point of pilotosis, but I think in our environment, we can justify that because we don't want a half-baked or half-thought-out process on which we are layering technology. So there is always trade-offs in anything new that's brought in. And it's true that we could be creating efficiencies at a certain point within very complex workflow and creating downstream, inefficiency. So it's all done in a very coordinated way, along with our nursing leaders.
And I think for us, the way we think about it is, I mean, obviously, as you said, we're all patients, right? Many of us have had procedures, and we notice when the nurses are busy, and have a lot they're trying to get done, and it frankly relaxes us as patients if the nurses are relaxed and aren't. And so we think about not how do we kind of take on nursing responsibility with the robot, but can we help, right? Like, I know that I sometimes don't push that button when I want ice chips because I know the nurses are really, really busy, right? You feel bad. If a robot could go, retrieve Jello from a refrigerator, grab a spoon, bring it to your bedside, help you get your glasses, help you get your that would be incredibly assistive without taking on that role of the nurse. But I think, we saw a number of presentations on AI today. We need, step function in this physical AI for dexterous manipulation to be able to open that refrigerator, grab those things. And but when we have that, we'll be able to restock. We'll be able to do a number of tasks that will hopefully give time back to nurses who can spend it with patients.
Yeah, just to reiterate, there's plenty of repetitive manual task, which is not requiring the level of skill on nurses bring. And there is tremendous amount of burden on healthcare providers on the front line that can be alleviated with robots.
I think we're at time. That was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much, Anjali.